The Lofree Flow is a 75% Bluetooth mechanical keyboard. It's low profile. It connects wirelessly to up to 3 devices and switches between macOS, iOS, and Windows and Android. So what separates it from the crowd? Lofree says that this is the first low-profile mechanical keyboard that has a gasket-mounted design. Now, I am kind of a mechanical keyboard aficionado, but I sort of like in a surface level way. I'm not the kind of person who modifies or builds or does any kind of stuff like that. I just sort of buy them off the shelf, so I don't really know much about gasket-mounted design. It's supposed to just have a more premium feel, kind of a more solid and sort of like cushioned feel to it. And I can't really objectively verify that, so you're just gonna have to maybe watch some other videos and sort of compare that with other keyboards that you might be familiar with. The other thing that Lofree is saying about this one is the first keyboard to offer Kale palm switches. The palms are self-lubricating, and Lofree is saying that they're going to get smoother over time. So those are the two sort of like standout differentiating features that Lofree is talking about with the Flow. I should mention that Lofree did send me the keyboard. They're not paying for this video or otherwise sponsoring it aside from the keyboard. They don't have any input into this video, nor will they see it before it's published. In this video, I want to talk about the features, but also give you sort of my pros and cons and opinions after having used it as my main keyboard for over 2 weeks now. I'm going to do a little bit of a comparison between this and the MX Mechanical typing average, typing speed average, and accuracy average, and then also a little bit of a sound comparison between those keyboards, in addition to the Keychron K2 version 2. Lastly, I'll just kind of sum it up with pros and cons and my overall feelings after having used this for over 2 weeks now. Let's start out with the list of features. I've already mentioned sort of the two standouts being the Kale palm switches and the gasket mounted design. There are two switch types on offer here. This is the Phantom, what Lofree is calling the Phantom switches. These are the tactile switches, which you can sort of equate to brown switches from all the other manufacturers. And then there is what they're calling the Ghost switches, which are linear, and you can probably think of those as red switches. This, I should mention, is on Kickstarter right now, and I don't know when this is going to be available around the world in other retailers, but right now you can get it on Kickstarter. I don't have an affiliate link or anything like that, so I'm not trying to sell you on these keyboards. But if you want to get this keyboard, if you like it, I would highly recommend you go get it on Kickstarter because it's a lot cheaper than it's going to be. I think it's going to retail for around $200, which is a lot. If you want the Phantoms like this one, this is the only color option you have. So this is like kind of the dark keycaps and this sort of dark gray housing. The Ghost switches, the whole colorway switches to like white. However, these are fully switchable, hot swappable keys, so you can switch these out for other kinds of switches. And of course, the keycaps are also swappable. Speaking of the keycaps, these are PBT, which you would expect for the price, and that is good because the MX Mechanical, on the other hand, which is also an expensive keyboard, relatively speaking, has just ABS plastic keycaps. And without going into the differences, PBT is much, much better and much more premium feeling, and these should be PBT on the MX Mechanical. This is 100% aluminum. The body of this keyboard, the base or the housing, and also the back plate is aluminum. There is RGB side lighting, so there's a little RGB light on either side of the keyboard, and there's multiple colors. If you hit function, it will go off to static to breathing, and then you can cycle through the different colors that are available. Underneath the keyboard, when you do have those little side lights on, it does have these little strips, which I guess is what's lighting through the other side of the keyboard. So it's kind of like an underside lighting and a side lighting. And then there's also backlighting underneath the keys, which you can turn on by hitting function F5 and F6 to brighten and dim it. The keycaps are not shine through, so you will only get the backlighting sort of like underneath and around the sides of the keycaps. Of course, this is Bluetooth. It can pair to up to 3 devices, and you just hit function 1, 2, and 3 to switch between your devices, and it's a long press and hold of those to initiate the pairing process. Very simple, pretty standard stuff there. It also can run as a wired keyboard. It does come with a USB-C to Type A cable. and it's a right angle cable. I don't know what I did with the cable. It's around here somewhere, but this is not the cable that it comes with. In comparison to the MX Mechanical, that is wireless only. So you can pair the MX Mechanical to up to 3 devices over Bluetooth, or you can use the Logic Bolt receiver, which it does come with if you have the Windows and Mac version, but apparently the Bolt receiver does not come with the Mac only version. But that keyboard cannot be run as a wired keyboard. So for gamers, anybody who really is going to prioritize speed and lack of latency, then you're going to want a wired keyboard. If you ever need to go into the BIOS or do anything with your computer before it gets into the operating system, it doesn't work over Bluetooth. Bluetooth usually gets enabled when you get into the operating system. So if you don't have the Bolt receiver with the Logitech, then you basically can't use it unless you're in the operating system. The other time that might be a problem is if you're trying to set up a new computer, you'll have to have another wired keyboard in order to go through that setup process. A definite bonus or plus for any keyboard that can run as a wired keyboard. Seems like they all should be able to. As I mentioned, of course, this can compare to Windows, Android, and Mac and iOS, and the keys have both commands printed on them. So you can see Command Alt here in Options/Windows, and you can also switch between the layouts. So with function N, as in November, it's Windows, Android layout, and function M, as in Mike, it's Mac OS, iOS layout. There's a 2000 milliamp hour battery, and Lofree is claiming 40 hours of continuous use of the battery. And my unscientific testing, after having been using this keyboard for over 2 weeks now, I'm charging it for the second time. For me, it's been about a week on average, but I haven't been using it a ton this past week. I've been doing a lot of family vacation-y kind of things. So if you're a heavy user who's typing all day long, I think a week is going to be on the longer side of things that you can expect. Typing test comparison between this and the MX Mechanical. I'm not a good typist, by the way, disclaimer. So here is the 10 Type Racer average results. The Lofree Flow, I got 69.4 words per minute with a 98% accuracy, and in the MX Mechanical, I did 71.6 words per minute with 98% accuracy. I'll kind of get into the reasons why I think I'm a little bit faster on the MX Mechanical than the Lofree when we do sort of the wrap up here in this video. Here's a quick comparison between how the different keyboards sound, the Lofree Flow with the tactile switches, the MX Mechanical with the tactile brown switches, and the Keychron K2 with Gateron brown switches. I guess I like brown switches. Of all the off-the-shelf, non-modified, non-customized mechanical keyboards that I have, that I've bought and owned, and there's a lot, kind of a nerd, but also not a super nerd, this is by far the most premium, sort of button-down, quality-feeling mechanical keyboard. I've got a couple of Duckies, I've got Logitech MX Mechanical, I've got the Keychron, I've got an IKBC. This is the best one in terms of the build quality, in terms of the overall feel, fit, and finish of it, easily. Everything else feels sloppy by comparison. I think sloppy is sort of like the best word that I can come up with to describe how those feel in comparison to this one. It looks and feels premium, all aluminum. The PBT keycaps go a long way. Any keyboard, I think that's over $120 should have PBT keycaps. It's wireless and wired. The looks or the aesthetics of any device is subjective. This keyboard is pretty understated. You know, there's a lot of flashy colorways out there with keyboards nowadays. This one is not that. I like the way it looks. I kind of feel like it fits in. I have a lot of black and dark things on my desk, dark desk. So when they offered to send this to me and they wanted to know which one I wanted, I said, give me the dark one. But even if you wanted white, if you have like kind of a more Mac thing going on in your desk, It's going to fit in. It's not going to be ostentatious and crazy. But of course, that's just personal preference. There's going to be more cons than pros, but I feel like I've already listed a lot of the pros just by talking about the features. And I just want to be thorough and just sort of mention like all the things that have occurred to me just so that you have the most information. There's not a lot of customizability with this keyboard. I don't think there's any software, and I don't think there's a lot of programmability built into it, at least that I could find in the instruction manual. So macros, whatever, I don't think there's any macros. And the function row, by default, it works with function, press and hold function, and then the secondary functions will work. So like the media keys, switching between different devices, etc., work by press and holding the function button. On the Logitech, for instance, you can go into the software and change that. So if you want the function keys to work by default, without a function press, you can do that. And if you want the media keys, the secondary keys to work by default without the function press, you can do that. In that keyboard, you can also reprogram a lot of the other keys to do different things. Whereas on this one, as far as I know, there's really no reprogrammability with it. There's no angle adjustments, so this is what you get. Again, I don't mind that. This is the angle that I prefer. But if you want to switch the angles, can't do that. The last major con I will mention is just sort of like the lighting implementation. I feel like it's a little bit underbaked. I don't really care for the side lighting. I feel like it looks like an afterthought because, I mean, it's really just these little bottom strips that are lighting up, and then it's shining through the side of the keyboard. It's not bright enough to really illuminate the desk, so you can hardly even see it. So all you really do see is just like this tiny little strip on the edge of the keyboard between the keys and the chassis. Without shine-through keycaps, the backlighting also seems a little bit like an afterthought. Let me just kind of wrap up with my impressions of using this keyboard. Again, I don't want to sound negative. I think this is the highest quality keyboard that I personally have, but it's not necessarily my favorite to type on. And I think the reason is the key presses they don't have a lot of weight to them, and there's not a lot of travel to them. So I find that it's easy to bottom out the keys while you're typing, and that feels to me almost more like typing on a membrane keyboard than a mechanical keyboard. And I say almost, I mean, obviously it's not the same. Having keys that have a little bit more weight to them and a little bit more force needed to actuate makes it so that you don't actually have to bottom out the key in order to press it. And it's just more comfortable. It's like, you know, kind of like banging your hands on a hard surface. Kind of feels like that's how this sort of feels, in my opinion. And I think that might be why I'm just ever so slightly more accurate with the MX Mechanical, because it does have that sort of like there's more travel to the keys on the MX Mechanical. So even though they're spongier and sort of like less accurate feeling, less consistent, I just sort of prefer that. But again, these are switchable, so you can always switch out to maybe a key with more travel and a key with more actuation force if you want to. So I think if you're in the market for a mechanical, low profile, 75% wireless, I can easily recommend this one. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you know where they go. As always, appreciate you watching the video, and maybe I'll see you in another one. And check out some of these other keyboard videos that are floating around my head.